Hi there, and welcome to writing a strong work-learn proposal for the winter 2025 cycle. If you are looking for information about a different work-learn cycle, please note that all the dates for this cycle will be different, and you can check the work-learn supervisor website for more information. Today, I'm going to be talking all about how to write a strong proposal for the work-learn program to get funding for student positions. So the things that I will cover are the general purpose and overview of the work-learn program. Then I'll get into the different parts of the work-learn proposal, what information the work-learn program asks for. I'll go into some tips and tricks, things that will help improve your chances of writing a strong proposal and hopefully getting funding. I'll talk a little bit about the position classification chart, which has some important information about the types of student positions that you can apply for. And then we'll wrap up with the important information and dates for the applications, how to submit a proposal through CareersOnline. And since this is a recorded version, there won't be time for questions. But if you do have any questions, please do reach out to the WorkLearn team. So let's start with the purpose of the WorkLearn program. Through participation in WorkLearn, we're promising that students will get mentorship, so opportunities to work with folks like yourself. This is a huge reason and motivator for students to join WorkLearn and apply for these jobs, is they report their relationship with their supervisor is the most important thing they get out of a WorkLearn experience. So the opportunities to connect with staff and faculty working at UBC is really the strongest motivator. And I'll talk a little bit later about how that will play into your proposal. It also offers students the opportunity to expand their network, develop an ownership and responsibility over their work, generate self-awareness, and have opportunities for reflection, have a chance to apply their knowledge in practical settings and contribute back to the university community, and of course, develop professional and personal skills. In terms of the work-learn proposal, it's kind of important to remember these two main things, and that is each section of the proposal that you're submitting to WorkLearn will be part of your proposal for funding, and it's also what students applying to the role will read. This is important to remember because everything that we're asking you to provide information about for your proposal is in service of helping students understand what they're applying to and if they would be a qualified candidate to apply. To that end, you'll hear me say this multiple times, but really try to focus on specificity and clarity over including every single detail about possible things a person will be doing in the job. Wherever possible, trying to provide a clear example is going to help you get better applicants to your position, as well as increase your chances of getting approved for funding. So everything that I'm going to be talking about today, you can also find the prompts, the questions, all the resources for in the submission guide. All you'll see in the video description below this video, there's all the links that I reference, and I encourage you to look at those resources for more in-depth information. So the first part of the WorkLearn proposal, or the job posting, is the job description. And that includes detailed information about two key pieces, the work performed, so kind of what we'd consider the classic job duties, as well as the qualifications. Just looking at the work performed for a moment, this is going to include detailed descriptions of duties as well as the level of complexity of the job. Generally, you want to avoid short general descriptions. So bullet points that just say something like data entry, those are just going to confuse the proposal readers who will be scoring your proposal. And it also confuses student applicants because data entry can, of course, mean a huge range of things. So I've added an example here of how you can take something like data entry and be much more specific. And the example is input research data from health outcomes survey using Qualtrics and Excel in collaboration with the head researcher. So you don't need to just add words or jargon to make it longer, but really try to be as clear and specific as possible if you're talking about a particular job duty. The level of supervision and opportunities to work with other staff, faculty, any opportunities for presentations or additional professional development is also important information that you can include here. These can be kind of more general comments. This is one area where you can be a little bit more general because there is space to talk more fully about supervision and opportunities for professional development a little bit further. But I think of this section as kind of your opening pitch to somebody about why this is a good job and why a student should apply to it, and really trying to give clear examples of what that work entails. The qualifications piece is the part of the proposal that signals to students whether or not they might be suited to the role, as well as what skills and experiences they might bring to it. So again, more specific information helps attract candidates who will excel in the position. The qualifications part of a proposal is one that sometimes people spend a little bit less time on because they might be thinking like anybody of any year level or any background and experience level could do this job, but it's really important to point out as many specific things as you can. So specific qualifications should include the experience level. Is this an entry level role, or are you expecting somebody who's had some previous experience with this type of work before? Any specific skills that would be helpful for it. So that includes technical, professional, interpersonal skills. And again, really trying to get even more specific with those. So not just saying professional communication, but breaking down what kind of professional communication. Who will the student be professionally communicating with? Again, thinking about, can I add a few examples to each piece rather than writing a lengthy explanation? If you are looking for a broad range of skills or levels of experience, you should indicate that in the qualifications so that students from different disciplines know that they should apply. If you're open to hiring first-year students, it's also nice to include that statement. Often first-year students think that they're not qualified for work-learn roles, but if you're open to somebody who's in their first year of studies, that's a great thing to include in the qualifications piece. You can also think about any coursework or specific degrees that may be helpful, if applicable to this section. The qualifications, of course, is going to be quite varied depending on the type of work you're expecting a student to do. But the main piece here should be that there's some good, clear information so that a potentially great candidate will see this part and recognize, hey, I have those qualifications and I want to apply for this job. We do get a significant amount of feedback from students that say often qualifications are too vague. So again, providing specific examples of what a qualification would look like is going to be really helpful to them. It's also going to help the readers who are scoring your proposal really understand what kind of work this is and what's being offered to students. Also consider accessibility, thinking through which of the qualifications are truly necessary for the job. We do see sometimes that people will include things like ability to carry a 40-pound load, even if that's not something that's actually a required part of the job. So really trying to think through is, am I maybe limiting who applies to this based off of things that are not truly necessary for this job? Are there things that are nice to have versus things that are actually really necessary to the job? Please also remember that students may have gaps in employment and volunteer opportunities. Many international students find this a big barrier to employment when coming to Canada, and that if you want to attract diverse candidates, highlighting skills needed over professional experience will carry you a long way. Of course, all the student applications to these jobs are in the middle of their studies. They're pursuing different degrees and different programs. They're at different levels of experience. So also keep that in mind to just sort of stay grounded in what's possible and realistic for a student candidate to these jobs. The whole point of work learn is that they will be learning and growing in these jobs and are not necessarily a candidate who's going to have 100% of the qualifications of the position. And a final note here, WorkLearn does not require transcripts, official or unofficial. So if you're asking for this, again, just consider whether it's truly necessary or helpful. Often, especially from other institutions, there's a fee associated for students by gathering a transcript. So if it's not information that you need for the role, WorkLearn also doesn't require it, and this can be an unintentional barrier to somebody potentially applying for the role. The next piece of the Work Learn proposal is all about the contribution to the university community, and that contains two parts. The first is what's the impact or contribution of the student's work towards the goals or unit of the program? So what will their work improve, create, or build upon? These can be, kind of a broad general statement. It might include part of a mission statement from your department. However, again, I'd look to being able to be quite specific about how is the student role going to impact the goals of the unit or program, not just saying what the goals are. And the next piece of this is about what work you've done as a supervisor, department, or unit to create a safe, supportive, and inclusive workplace, as well as what supports do you offer to students. This is a piece that, again, we've gotten a lot of feedback from students about wanting more information about what type of work environment they're going to be going into and how they'll be supported. So, just as an example of something that you could include, you could put, excuse me, all staff in our unit has completed positive space training, and we offer the training to our student staff as well. Hopefully you would have additional things to put there, but I like this example of something that's really clear and specific, as well as it's not something that is copied and pasted out of, a strategy document, but is really concrete and helps students know specifically what's in place to help them. This section can be difficult to write. It's important to think through what's going to be most applicable and true for your unit or your program. You can also refer to the UBC Indigenous Strategic Plan, the Inclusion Action Plan, the Equitable Hiring Guide, as well as all of the resources in the submission guide. And as I kind of alluded to already, please do not copy and paste a departmental equity statement. Those are UBC-wide, and while those are good and true, what we're looking for here is something that is specific to the work that you've done as a department or unit. This isn't a statement of intent or values. This is about what supports and training have already taken place or will take place. On top of that, please don't list the mandatory UBC safety training. Again, this is UBC-wide and is implied. That is something that is a part of every role at UBC and not the information that we're looking for in this section. So the last piece of the Work Learn proposal is the student learning components, and that has three pieces within it. So if you think about this, you've kind of got three main chunks, and the student learning components is the last, and I would argue, probably most important piece of a Work Learn proposal. And this is really all about what students will gain out of working in the role. And that contains three different pieces. The supervision and training students will get, the connections and learning, so thinking about people and opportunities, and then career exploration. So looking at those each a little bit more in depth, supervision and training, somewhat self-explanatory, looking for specific information about what kinds of orientation and training students will receive, what kinds of feedback and ongoing support students will receive, and what kinds of encouragement and reflection opportunities there will be. So this could include information about performance reviews, weekly, biweekly meetings, other opportunities for students to gain skills, if they'll be desk shadowing, if they'll be buddied up with somebody else who's done the job before. Again, giving the student some sense of this is how you'll be supported and trained in the role. Really, again, encouraging you to provide specific examples. You don't have to list out every training session you do, but it's a good idea to get into some specifics. The best way to get the maximum possible score out of this section is to provide really clear examples. The second piece is connections and learning. So this is thinking about what are some of the mentorship opportunities will be available for students. Will they be working with grad students? Will they be working with other staff or faculty in your unit as well? Who will they have the chance to connect with in their work? Are there other opportunities available for students to expand their network? And how will the position develop and enhance the student's personal learning and professional growth? So this is kind of thinking more about the professional development opportunities. That could be conferences, webinars, additional trainings, one-day institutes, things that students can attend to sharpen their skills. And the last piece is about career exploration. Of course, all students are applying to Work Learn because they want to explore a different part of their career. So this section should be about what are the skills and workplace competencies a student will gain in the role, and how is this role preparing the student for future employment in a particular field or even just more generally. And lastly, how will this role support students' academic growth? With all three of these parts, I really encourage you to think about if you look at the end of a term and project ahead, what are you hoping a student is going to gain out of this position? If you've applied for work learn funding before and received it and had students in the role, you could also talk to them and ask them what were the things they saw as the most beneficial that you could include in this section. The student learning components to me is really sort of the learn part of work learn. This is a really important part of your work learn proposal. And if there's not a good amount of detail and examples, this is a part where we see people tend to lose points in the scores of their work learn proposals. So have a good look at this and spend some good time with it. I've already mentioned this first tip about talking to folks who have already done the role before, maybe some of the projects they've completed or possible projects you might want students to work on as things you could include in this section. Of course, I've mentioned several times, I'll probably say it again at some point here, providing clear examples wherever possible. Another way to think of this is the what is important, but also so is the how and the who. Sometimes we can just have lists of things, but we don't always talk about how that work will happen or be supported or who will be supporting it. And that's really important information for students applying to work learn positions. And lastly, if you have current work learn students or other staff in your unit that works closely with this position, I'd also encourage you to have them review your proposal before submitting it because they might have other things that they think should be added into that role that you might have missed, or they might have other reflections that could be shared as well. So those are the three components. I know it sounds like a lot of information, and it is, but really want to frame those as that's the information that students are looking for, and that's why that is also mirrored in the rubric that I'm showing you currently. So all work learn proposals are scored based on this rubric, and you'll see the rubric follows exactly the components that I just spoke about. So we've got the job description separated into work performed, as well as the qualifications, the contribution to the university community, and then the student learning outcomes as well. So there's those three main sections, and then you'll see that there are 6 possible areas where you can be scored on, and those 6 things represent all the individual components of those 3 big pieces. So the maximum possible score for a work learn proposal is 18. And the chart at the top of this rubric, which is in the submission guide and linked from the video description, talks a little bit about what goes into those scores. So I'm just really going to focus on 3, the highest possible score for a section, because that's what we hope you get. And you'll see the first things said there are clear, specific, detailed with concrete examples. So again, everything that we're telling you here in this webinar is really in service of you getting maximum possible points on your work learn proposal. A 3 would mean all the guiding questions have been answered thoroughly and there's no information missing. So a reader of your proposal would have no unanswered questions and would recommend this position as an exceptional example of a work learn job. If you look at the other possible scores, a 0 is really going to be reserved for where something is just not answered. But that does happen from time to time where people submit a proposal and maybe miss a section. If there's no information present for a section, it will likely receive a 0. So it's a big possible amount of points that are lost if each section is not addressed thoroughly. In terms of some tips and tricks to wrap up and think about your proposal, I'd really try to focus on specificity over length. So include examples that will help a reader or a potential applicant understand versus copying and pasting large swaths of strategic documents and multi-paragraph explanations of things. An example really illustrates a lot and can give a lot of information without being too lengthy. We do notice that job proposals that are really long tend to get fewer applicants, and we've also heard that supervisors also find the applicants are maybe not as strong. And so having something that includes enough information without it being overly lengthy is going to be a great way to get the applicants that you want for your role. When you're writing your proposal, do remember that both the proposal readers, so the folks who will be scoring your proposal, as well as the students applying, might have limited knowledge of your unit or discipline. So you want to avoid a lot of really heavy jargon or technical terms unless they're absolutely necessary for the job, because at the heart of it, somebody needs to understand what it is being offered here. So you don't need to speak in too general or vague terms, but if this is a really technical research project, there's, the job performed piece might be where you share that really technical information, but you're probably going to be wanting to speak in more general terms for the other sections of the proposal. And lastly, the best way to write a strong proposal and get the maximum possible points is to aim to answer each question in the submission guide and on the Careers Online form. So providing examples again wherever you have for them. So in short, really the message here is try to be clear, be specific, and leave no unanswered questions as the best way to score the maximum possible points for your proposal. A few notes about funding, because we always get questions about this. Everybody must apply for WorkLearn funding each cycle. So if you've had a previous successful application for WorkLearn, that does not guarantee future funding. You still need to reapply for funding. And I would definitely encourage you to always be looking to make upgrades or changes to your proposal before submitting, just to make sure that it's as strong as possible, and that there's nothing that's being missed there. We do receive well in excess of 1,000 proposals each cycle. So the exact approval rate varies and depends on a number of factors beyond our control, like the total number of applications, as well as the total amount of funding that's available. So just to keep in mind that this is a competitive process. The more work that you put into your WorkLearn proposal is often going to yield you the better results. And lastly, all funding decisions are final. WorkLearn does not accept late submissions or resubmissions. Just again, because of the high demand, we're not able to accommodate folks making changes and then resubmitting their applications. It would be for the next cycle. So that's why it's also really important to make sure you take note of when the deadlines are and provide the strongest possible proposal before the deadline. For the position classification chart, you'll see here this is an example from summer 2023. The most up-to-date version is linked in the submission guide and on our website. But this is an important piece because there's a few different types of jobs available, job classifications that you can choose from. There's project worker, project assistant, office library worker, researcher professional, and daycare assistant. This chart and the associated wages are developed in coordination with HR as well as payroll and finance to help determine these rates. So when you're submitting a WorkLearn proposal, you will have to pick one of these job classification categories. So let's say I look through the descriptions of each of these on that left-hand column, and I decide a project assistant is the best fit for me. That's what I'm going to be submitting my project under. It's really important to take a close look at this because this isn't generally not something that you can change after the fact. We do review all submissions coming in just to make sure that the job description aligns with the job category picked. We will reach out to you if we feel like maybe there's a mismatch between those and work with you to submit for what we think the correct one should be. But that's usually a collaborative process and something that is really where there's a big difference between what's offered in the job category and then what's in the proposal. The most important thing to remember here is just look at your WorkLearn proposal, especially the job description, and then look through the descriptions of each of these job categories and pick the one that you feel fits the best. Few of the resources available to you, of course, we have the submission guide, the position classification chart, the rubric, which is attached in the submission guide, as well as the Work Learn Supervisor Guide. So there's a lot of resources to have a look at to help give you tools and information that's going to help you submit the strongest Work Learn proposal possible. Few more things as we wrap up here. Just the important information and dates. Please always check the WorkLearn staff faculty webpage for the most up-to-date dates. But for the coming winter 25 cycle, which is going to be from September through until April, the call for proposals will open Monday, May 26th, and it will be open until Monday, June 16th at 11:59 Pacific Standard Time. This is a hard deadline. Again, we do not accept late submissions past this point. And this is important because you will be required to have a Careers Online account in order to submit your proposal. I'm probably going to say this in a second again, but just make sure that you actually have access to a Careers Online account so that you can post the job or submit the job rather. If you do this at 11:58, your account is not going to be activated in time to submit. So try to do this right away and make sure that your Careers Online account is working. So if jobs close, the proposal window closes on June 16th, that means right away we start doing review of proposals from mid-June until the end of July. So the funding announcements will come out July 21st, between July 21st and July 25th. So all of the jobs posted for the winter term will go up on Careers Online from July 28th until August 18th. And then that means your student recruitment and hiring window will be happening from mid to late August. This can also extend through September if you need more time to find candidates. We know that these timelines are always tight. We've tried to increase the number of days that postings are up on Careers Online. But ultimately, this is always a really busy period. So I would be thinking now about blocking off times for interviews and just making sure everything's ready to go for when we get to that portion. A few last points here. In order to submit a proposal through Careers Online, Careers Online is the platform that we use to post all WorkLearn jobs and something students are very familiar with at UBC. If you haven't set up an account again, just make sure that you've logged into Careers Online and initiate the process. So the reason why it's important to do this earlier than not is it can take up to 1 business day for your account to be activated. So don't wait until the due date to do this. Once you're in Careers Online and you're wanting to submit your proposal, you're going to only select the UBC Vancouver WorkLearn program as a part of your job posting. If you select anything else, the WorkLearn office will not receive your proposal, nor will it be considered for the funding cycle. So UBC Vancouver WorkLearn program is perhaps the most important piece of information to take away from this to make sure that that's selected. Make sure, of course, you fully answer all the prompting questions. They will look exactly like all the components we talked about at the beginning of this webinar, and follow the submission guide for hints along the way. Make sure you select the posting dates that are specified on the form. Those are the posting dates I just mentioned. And then, of course, select the position classification that you feel fits your job the best. And you can check that with the position classification guidelines. And then also make sure you read through and accept the WorkLearn terms and conditions. There's a lot of information in this document, but it's a lot of really important information about how the WorkLearn program operates. And it will be really important for you to read that, especially if this is your first time submitting, to understand what you're agreeing to if you receive WorkLearn funding. If you have any questions, you are of course welcome to reach out to us at work.learn@ubc.ca. We know that this is a very busy time and there's lots of things to consider in your application, so please do reach out to us if anything is confusing. But again, you've got lots of resources available to help you submit the best possible proposal. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for supporting important work on campus and providing opportunities for students, as well as supporting their professional growth.